All right, Alexander, we have protests in France, big protests in France, and justified protests, if you ask me, because it looks like Macron, out of fear of putting this pension reform bill to Parliament for a vote, fear that it might not pass, he decided to bypass the Parliament vote along with his prime minister, and they enacted some sort of I don't want to say loophole, but they found something in the French constitution which allows them to bypass Parliament and just to enact this law just straight through without the approval of the people. And everyone is very upset about this in France, but Macron, he did it. And I think he's going to pay a very, very heavy political price for this. But protests now. He's going to have to deal with the protests.
Absolutely. This is an extraordinary move by Macron, but I have to say also one very much in character. I mean, he's never been one who's found it easy to cope with opposition. He's always had, as I said, this sort of autocratic approach, and we see it happen. Now, he was going to lose the vote in the parliament. His party lost its majority in the parliament in the legislative elections last year. He's very frustrated, apparently, by that. We were talking a few weeks ago about there were rumours that he's actually thinking of resigning and might resign if he can't ram this pension reform through. Pension reforms are unpopular. They always are in every country. You remember a couple of years ago, we were talking about the pension reform in Russia, and that brought down Putin's popularity there. I'm not saying anything about this French pension reform, whether it's good or bad. It's just that it is extremely unpopular. And for a president of France to bypass Parliament, to ignore the National Assembly of the French people, elected by the French people, over an issue as important to people in France as this one is, well, that is playing with dynamite. Now, it's the sort of thing that Macron does do. As I said, he wants to show that he's, the all-powerful king, emperor of France. It also, and I have to say this, it looks to me very much like a last desperate throw of a president who senses that he's going down. He knows he knew he would lose this vote. If the vote went against him in the parliament, the pension reform would be shot under the waterline. It would sink. His authority as president on domestic policy would disappear. He'd look like a lame duck. It's his last attempt to assert himself, to show that he's still in charge in France. So he's done this thing. I think it's a completely inappropriate thing to do. I don't think this provision in the French constitution was intended to be used to ram through a reform of this complexity and this and as controversial as this in the way that Macron has done, but he's used it. Now, there's various possibilities. There's talk of a vote of no confidence in his government, which may come. There's talk about fresh parliamentary elections, which, given how angry people are, could result in an even smaller, a bigger majority, anti-Macron majority in the National Assembly. There's talk of a referendum, the Parliament forcing through some kind of a referendum on this pension reform. And there's talk of a legal challenge. There's all kinds of things. And of course, there's protests in the streets and all of those things. If any one of these things happen and Macron loses, it seems to me that his authority is not just shot below the waterline, but I think demands at that point on him to go will probably increase. People will say that he did this extremely authoritarian, autocratic, anti-democratic thing, trying to ram through a controversial, unpopular reform on the people of France, and that he's really not the right person, therefore, to remain president. And I think you see demands for him to go. And I do wonder whether at some level that might even be what he wants. If he's really looking for a way out, provoke some kind of a crisis like this one. And if he loses, and perhaps he might lose, he is able to depart the scene. You say, I did my best to reform France, and the forces against me were too great, but I've established myself as the great reformer, and next time I'll come back with a sweeping mandate for change. And of course, if on the contrary, his gamble succeeds, he can come and say, look, in spite of all the opposition, I've prevailed. I'm still the emperor, if you like, and I'm still the ruler of France. So you can see why, for a person of Macron's vanity, and a man who dislikes the kind of horse trading that politics involved, you can see the attractions that there might be in going for broke in the way that he's just done.
I was just going to say that I think that that this is Macron's way of retiring, of getting out of the presidency and moving on to some sort of Atlantic Collective West institution or something like that. Because you only go after pension reforms when you have the political capital to spend, because you know that you're going to get knocked down a good 5 or 10 points in your popularity. I mean, it's a given. No matter what the pension reform is, no matter how light or how severe it is, it's unpopular. Your approval ratings are going to get knocked down, and you only do these things when you have the high approval rating to spend, which is what Putin did when he decided to go after the pension reforms. He understood that he had a very high popularity, and if he lost 5 or 10 points on the popularity, so be it. He goes from 85 to 75. I don't know what the numbers were, but I'm just saying. Macron is at like 20, 15, 10. I don't know. I mean, how much lower can you go? So to me, I don't know. I think this is Macron's way. Maybe he knows it. Maybe he doesn't know it, but he's just doing it deep down inside. He doesn't want to admit it, but maybe this is his way of saying, I can get out of this now. So you know what? If things don't work out with the pension reform, it's like you said, I can just go to the French people and say I tried. I'm out. Now I can get appointed NATO Secretary General or IMF chief or whatever. He can move on to the next globalist thing. I don't know. I mean,
this is what I
don't
believe.
Go after pension reform when your approvals are in the dump.
Just not in the dump, and you don't try and impose them in this way. I mean, this is what I believe. That, as I said, it's his way of going out in a bang, showing to his smart friends in the West, in America, in Brussels, look, you see, I'm not going to be pushed around by these people. I stood up to them. I couldn't prevail because, the French don't understand my genius. But you do. So, you can make me Secretary General of NATO, President of the European Central Bank, Secretary General of the United Nations, or you can put me in charge of UNESCO. You can do one of these nice things. And you can see, this is my reward for fighting your corner for you in this way. And if just possibly by chance you pull it off, which I don't think you will, by the way, then you can also come back and say, look, I'm still the emperor in France, and when my term ends, you can give me all those nice positions because I ran through against the united opposition of the French people and all their elected representatives this deeply unpopular reform, which shows what a tough person I actually am. So, you could see how, as I say, you could see the attraction for him. Meanwhile, what it does to France, however, is very bad. And I think we need to understand that. I mean, there's Macron. We can talk about Macron. We can talk about the pluses and minuses of the pension reform, which I'm not going to, by the way, because I don't know. I mean, probably French pensions do need to be reformed. But ramming them through in this way, all it's going to do is going to make many, many people in France very, very angry. It's going to create more instability. There's already been strikes. There's already been protests. There's already been, lots of unrest across France. It's going to make that even worse, even greater. If it succeeds, it's going to make people even more sullen and even more angry. And of course, if it fails, it will result in a political crisis that Macron can walk away from, but which the French people will be stuck with. So I have to say, it's Macron preserving his image, positioning himself for the next plum post, gambling with his position as president of France, but at the risk of destabilizing his own country. I mean, utterly irresponsible to my way of thinking, and shows what a elitist individual he is, because he's not really interested or engaged with the French people, doesn't understand them. I don't think he likes them very much.
Well, I think this is a trend in Europe now because, you look at leaders like Macron, or you look at leaders like Mark Rutte in the Netherlands, and he just lost a big vote to the farmers' citizen movement, the BBC in the upper Senate. A shocking result, but he lost. He lost that one, and he lost it because he doesn't really care about the people in the Netherlands. He wanted to pass through this agenda, this climate agenda that the globalists and the EU are forcing him to do. And it just seems like when you look at these leaders, they've gotten to a point, the Macrons, the Ruttes, all these guys, they've gotten to a point where, in a way, they're almost, I don't want to say they're admitting, they're signaling that, you know what, we really don't care about the people in the Netherlands or the people in France. It's not our priority. Our priority is to please the globalist institutions. And so if our priority is to please the globalist institutions, why do I want to be president of France or prime minister of the Netherlands? Wouldn't it be better if I just get appointed in one of these positions? At the end of the day, this is where the power is. This is where the centralization is happening. What am I going to do being a president, which is just kind of a de facto governor of an EU member state? Where's the power in that? I think you're starting to see a lot of leaders in Europe starting to move in this direction where they're saying, being a president or prime minister of an EU member state, that's not where all the money and power is. I got to figure out a way to get to Brussels and to EU headquarters or to the UN or the WHO or whatever, the IMF.
And to do that, you follow the policy that, these institutions want you to. And if your people don't like it, well, that's their problem, because ultimately you're not answerable to the people of your own country anymore, as democratic politicians are. You're answerable to the apparatus of which you want to become a part. That is exactly what is happening. I mean, go back to Annalena Baerbock. What did she say in Prague all those weeks ago? I don't care whether people protest or, in Germany, if the people in Germany are unhappy because of my sanctions policy, I'm going to persist with it no matter what. I don't care what people think. This is what I am going to do. She knows perfectly well that in the bureaucracies in Brussels, the NATO and EU bureaucracies, that is what they want to hear. It's an affirmation, if you like, of their loyalty, of her loyalty to them. And that's exactly the sentiment that all of these people have. With, as I said, the people in Brussels, the stance that Macron is taking, it's going to please them. It's going to prove to them how reliable he is, how loyal he is, how he is prepared to show two fingers to his own people because he's conducting the orthodox policy line, which is that you always raise the pension age. You may be right. I mean, again, I'm not saying you're not, but that's what this is now all about, and it's reproducing itself in every part of the collective West, because of course you have similar problems in every part. You have it in Britain, even though we've left the EU. You have it in the United States to a great degree, and you can be absolutely sure that the media will be mobilised to support Macron, and they will be saying, this reform is necessary. He's shown great courage in doing what he has, and you can already read the headlines and the articles and the commentators telling us all of these things. So this is exactly how you describe it. That is the reality of politics in Europe today, not just in Europe, as I said, right across the collective West. As I said, we no longer function as the kind of democracies that we were. These people instead conceive of themselves as apparatchiks, party secretaries, if you like, party obkom first secretaries, to use the Soviet terminology, who are responsible ultimately to the center. And that's how they will continue.
Yeah, that's why they fall all over themselves to go visit Zelensky in Kiev. It's not that they care about Ukraine or they like Zelensky. Zelensky is the avatar of the neoliberal globalism, and they have to go and bow down towards Zelensky in Kiev. It's symbolic. It's them going there to show that they're team players. They're loyal to the globalist ideology. And you do that by going to Kiev and promising weapons to Ukraine and meeting with Zelensky and saying for as long as it takes, and we're going to be victorious. It's all symbolic. It's all part of this new ideology, religion that the collective West leadership is all subscribed to. That's why they do it. And I was thinking about, for example, Estonia, Kaja Kallas, the prime minister. She was talking all of this smack against Russia and the Russian people and what they're going to do to Russia and how they're going to reprogram the Russian people. And then when she was talking about all this stuff during the Munich Security Conference, right after the conference, you get reports that she's a front runner to be the NATO Secretary General. And I just sat there. I said, she doesn't care about the people of Estonia. She's auditioning for the part. Just like Baerbock's auditioning for the part, just like Rutte has been auditioning for the part, and Macron, and they're all trying to say, look what I will do for the position of EU commissioner. Look what I'll do so I can get to run the ECB or wherever they're going to stick them.
Exactly. That's exactly what this is all about. But as I said, coming back to what the practical effects, as I said, it leaves France in turmoil. It's impossible to see how this is going to end well for France. I mean, it may be that this reform is needed. I'm not saying it's not, by the way, but ramming it through in this way, if it succeeds, it's going to demoralize and anger people even more and alienate them further from the political system. You remember that referendum in France rejecting the EU constitution? They get the EU constitution nonetheless. It's now called, I can't remember what treaty, but it's just the Lisbon Treaty. It's going to be another example of that. And of course, if it fails, you have a political crisis. And how is that good for France? You don't care about France. You move on, and that is, in effect, what the political class has become. They become parasitic on the people they govern.
Yeah, but that's the dilemma that we've talked about for such a long time with the European Union. It's the whole goal of the EU, the motivation of the EU is to strengthen the core, to strengthen the center at the expense of the member states and the periphery. But the periphery crashes, the member states crash, and where does that leave the center? But everything is being drawn towards the center, and it's weakening the member states. But without the member states, you don't have a center. This is the dilemma that the EU always finds itself in. They had Merkel for so many years, who skillfully managed this. She kicked the can down the road, and she did many things that I don't approve of. But she managed to keep the system afloat.
Yes.
Now I think it's just going to start to crumble.
Well, it's killing the host, isn't it? The parasite is killing the host, because that's exactly what it's going to do. It's going to take. It may take time. It may have disastrous effects, and of course, the longer it takes, the more disastrous those effects will be, and the more debilitating it will be. But look at the European Union already. The countries that make up what the former European Economic Community, which is smaller, much smaller territorially than the EU. In 1980, it accounted for, 30+% of world GDP? The EU today accounts for something like 12%. It's a diminishing force. It's becoming a marginal economic player. It's stagnating. It's economically stagnating. It's got higher inflation than Russia does. Exactly, more countries, because of higher inflation than Russia does. Its industries are closing down. Its people, are struggling. And the EU leadership isn't interested in that, because they're interested in the power games of the centre. And this is very, very bad. But you're absolutely right. It is killing the host, and the longer it takes, the more damage will be done. But eventually, as you absolutely rightly imply, this is unsustainable. At some point, it will break down. It is inevitable. It can't continue like this indefinitely. It never does.
Yeah, it expanded and got weaker.
Yeah. It expanded.
It's a business that it's a business that expands, but it makes less money. It's not working.
Yes, but you see, expansion has made centralization much easier, and that's been one of the reasons it's happened. So it strengthened the center at the expense of the states, but it's also made the entire system much more unwieldy, which of course benefits the people in the centre, because the more complex and intricate the bureaucracy at the centre is, the more jobs there are, the more powerful in some ways the bureaucracy becomes. After all, they're now, wanting to decide about, judicial appointments in Poland. They're telling airlines which countries they can fly over and which they can't. They're doing all of that kind of thing. So that's how it works. It makes the centre more powerful, everyone else weaker, until eventually, as I said, it all collapses.
All right. We'll leave it there. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble. We're on Rockfin, Odyssey, BitChute, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.